that case, like people were like, you made this work thing. But because that is quite different on that, I think it makes sense. You know, I mean, it obviously, but it's also not. So. I think that's what. So I'm gonna send Eric. To talk about it and say, hey, you know, some of my, you know, about. Require some read. So I don't want to be surprised because I was finally getting my work done. Okay, I'm not gonna make it to birthday. I'm gonna do a bunch of property work. I read through the legal documents. Pretty good. So now I know. Now I've read through two of those. Because the other fight. What is now I'm trying to get a step. You know, no. So now you're gonna have what over, huh? It sounds like you're putting a little bit of a pause on it. Potential. Exactly. And so since we've learned that we are not going to get any good to be and alert up front. Well. Yeah, anyways, so that's so I think we're gonna wait. But whatever, I can talk about that. I don't. I mean, you can probably been part of the conversation. Sorry. How are you? It's a beautiful day. Well, I just was like, I just thought it started. So, but this is just new to me. I had been sort of plotting along trying to figure out how to hold it over. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, there's a little bit of coding in the I think this everybody? No, that was found in the animal. Right. That was found in the alley. Oh. Right. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I do. No, I sure. Oh, yeah.
Well, I think it.
Testing.
And the whole time. Good morning, everybody. I've got a few extra copies of documents. If anybody else wants to grab another copy here.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I can. The shade back here.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Big
Knowing.
Creating a halo effect. Forgot my Trump debate today, I'm sorry. So good morning, everybody. I'm Tal Anderson, treasurer. Excited to be with you all this morning to get some feedback about the in-process 2024 budget. As you'll see, this is very much a work in progress. And on the income side, there's only one line that's filled in with a number, and that's really by design at this point. So obviously we have Pledge Sunday coming up next Sunday. A lot of these numbers are going to get filled in next Sunday and over the next few weeks. But really wanted to hear from you all this morning on a lot of the expense side of things. So we're going to be having a few guest speakers talk about their sort of programmatic or table areas within the congregation, get a property update, MCFF, talk about reparations, and hear sort of other ideas that y'all have as the budget is being put together by myself and the finance committee. And then that'll be approved by our council and presented at the annual meeting, which I believe is February 11th. So again, on the income side, there's only one number that's filled in. That's the LBC line. Some of you might be wondering, hey, why is it only $7,000? So LBC is sort of going through sort of another rough patch. I would say a number of us, myself included, have listened in to some national calls happening with alums, other local support committee volunteers from over the years. And I think the future of LBC is very much in doubt. They're obviously committed to their lease with our Saviors through summer, but I think anything beyond that is really touch and go at this point. There are only 8 volunteers right now in the whole country. My house in Milwaukee had 8 people. So there were probably 140 volunteers my year back in 92, 93. So it has shrunk dramatically. And I'm just not sure it's in a position to sort of survive. So over the years, we've had $7,000 as a placeholder. Some years when we've been a little more confident, we've bumped that back up to 12,000, assuming we're going to get full rent. Obviously, we're back down to 7 this year because we're just not sure what things are going to be at. So really sad, but sort of the reality, and want to be cautious and careful as we're developing the budget. So moving on to the expense pieces. So salaries and of your 5-page packet, salaries and benefits are being filled in by the personnel committees. So and myself. So yes.
To your knowledge, are the salaries of our pastors going to be at Senate guidelines?
They all already are. And so my assumption would be that with whatever cost of living or increases, those would also be within Senate guidelines. Yes. I think the one piece here, we will have some sort of guest preacher sort of fill-in numbers that we'll be updating. Martha, is it?
Can we?
Go for it, go for it.
Explain the weird thing about pastor's salaries, that you have both the salary line, but also the housing.
Yes,
line?
yes, yes. So salaries, pastors, I might say this wrong, but in my mind, pastors technically and legally are independent contractors. And so they have a very unique tax structure where they designate a portion of their income towards their housing allowance, which then is non-taxable, I believe. So again, it's the pastor himself or herself, themselves who sets that number. And again, that's part of the complicated world of tax law for being a pastor. So it's a number they've designated. We reflect each of those numbers in the budget. It doesn't have a financial consequence for the congregation, but it's just those numbers as they have self-designated. And it covers mortgage and rent and furniture, literally any housing related expenses that I'm aware of. So, but again,
From an older time of there often being a parsonage.
That's right.
yes, yes. So, that's just a number that they choose. Martha, is your time off, is that sort of public ed or is that sort of?
Oh, no.
Okay, okay, well, now I'm just saying, so. So, the council did vote that Martha is gonna be taking a sabbatical, in the spring after Easter through sort of early to midsummer, so. That's another thing that we'll be budgeting for is obviously some fill-in. Functions while Martha's out on a well-deserved sabbatical time, so. Okay, let's have our first guest speaker just to talk about property, which I believe. I don't think what page I was on. Just so you also know, as I did this handout, I just went back a few years to show the budget numbers from 21, 22, 23, just as points of reference, so you can see. If you're looking at a particular line item, you can sort of see the history of budgeted numbers through the past number of years. But we again want to have Martha talk about MCFF. Anissa's going to talk about some reparation stuff. And then we'll first have Rico talk about property stuff, just to give us some context. Those are some of the sort of moving parts and some of the, I think, bigger things that we'll need to be sort of thinking about and wrestling with as we're finalizing the budget here. So Rico, take it over.
Good morning, everyone. I, of course, am Rico, and I've been on property committee for a few years, maybe 4. I'm also an independent contractor. I've been landscaping and shoveling snow for about 45 years in Minnesota. So I launched my LLC last year, just a few months ago. And I do some contract work for our Savior's Lutheran Church. I'm also a volunteer member, and I just walk around picking up garbage on a daily basis. We have a lot of needles here. We have a lot of discarded needles. We have a lot of discarded trash in our alleys. Whenever you drive down the alleys, you can see all the trash and garbage. So some of that is almost, I think maybe all of that is our concern. With the growth that we're experiencing with members and the growth that we're experiencing with our congregation, our community, we live into things more. We grow into things more with the LVC house, with the greenhouse, St. Stephen's, with Westwood and the shelter, Calvary. And so we're growing into things more, we're living into things more, and we're opening up and peeling back the layers of some deferred maintenance. You've been hearing about that for a long time. But there's also the deferred upkeep and upgrades and updates. You know, there's technology upgrades, there's roofing upgrades, there's garbage disposal, kitchen upgrades. You know, there's things that we haven't ever really done. If you walk in this building here in the narthex in the hallways, I want you to sometime today, this morning, walk around this first floor here and look up. Just look up at the ceiling and count how many cameras there are in this building. and how long ago you remember any one of them being turned on. That's all I'm asking. So as we look into our property and as we look into our safety, our community knowledge and experiences, we have this sidewalks out here that are sinking and leveling and resetting. And if you look at these sidewalks all around the building, many of them are kind of shifting over 20, 25 years of settling. And that can be a danger. Kids run around, people can't get in, who have mobility issues, have a little bit more of a struggle getting in. So these are things that I'm always kind of looking at. I'm always seeing. I was a safety geek, so I'm always like, don't run, stop, so it's always a concern. Camera updates are not a unique and a new thing. Camera updates are what we are living into in the year 2023. And we have to kind of wrap our heads around the costs and the expenses and stuff like that. But as far as, we're not talking about prosecuting people. We're talking about, well, who was in the building? What happened then? What happened there? Why do the alarms keep going off? Stuff like that. So getting a little bit better idea of what's going on. Nathan, do you have a property update real quick, just a minute or two about the solar roof and the solar? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rico. I'll just say, having been on property committee with Rico and others for a couple of years now, it's just really obvious. It is a hard thing to do to manage not just a building as big and complex and versatile as this church building, but also the associated properties around our campus. So, Rico, super grateful for all the things you do. Garbage pickup, shoveling, fixing, noticing, it's huge. I'll just share, well, and I mean, there's so many other people. I mean, Nancy Nygaard Johnson does, I feel like a million things, including keeping our church running, and not to mention, Margaret and Ken and others who are part of that. So, I'm just going to speak very briefly about the solar project that I think we're all really excited about. There's tons of sort of incentives out there to get solar. We last year thought that those incentives were so good that we would be able to get solar and a roof paid for basically by tax credits and incentives and investors that were okay with a lower rate of return on their investment. We've sort of worked through a variety of different iterations, a variety of different roofers, a second sort of financer, and we have found a financing partner that we like to go along with Apadana. The unfortunate thing is it has become clear in conversations with them that we were a bit oversold from Apadana in terms of what they could sort of accomplish in terms of rolling a roof cost into the tax credit and incentive program, which I mean, in retrospect, makes sense. It was a bit too good to be true that we would get an extra $100,000 or so to put on a new roof. Nevertheless, that is what they told us. So, so we've been working forward still, figuring out if we're going to sort of pay for the roof out of our own pocket and then get the solar installed for free. There would be some savings from cost of the electricity generated being decreased due to that over time. But we've actually just, I think recently, council has decided to sort of put a little bit of a pause on this, given some other sort of long-term planning. One of which is, if we think about the building, we do need a new roof, but it would be really silly to put on a new roof and solar panels and then think about adding, say, a second story above the office. So it's not that that's been determined that that's going to happen yet, but since we no longer can pay for the roof and the solar in one go, I think the thought is, and people who are on council should correct me if I'm wrong, it's worth the maybe additional 1 year delay, maybe 2 year delay, whatever it is. In 2 years, we could still put a new roof and solar on and not a second story. But if there is going to be a second story in the next 2 to 5 years, it'd be really silly to spend the money to put on a new roof and solar and then have the additional expense of ripping that off again to put on a second story. So, that's kind of new news. And we actually are just in the process of sharing that with our partners in the solar project and the roofers in the solar project. So that you're some of the first people to hear that. Any questions about that? Okay, that's where we're at with the solar roof.
Thank you, Nate, for all your hard work.
So again, properties on page 4 of the 5-page packet. I guess as I was looking at some of the expenses for next year, there are some maintenance numbers that are significantly higher. Going from 30, it's been in the mid-30s, it's jumping up to 40 proposed. Custodial services are going up somewhat. Most of the others are staying pretty steady, and frankly, on some of the utilities, I was expecting maybe some bigger increases, so I think that's a good thing, but we've done some analysis of, you know, where things are at. I guess the other property related piece, sort of unrelated to the specific property expenses, again, about some of the planning is, you know, if we're thinking in conjunction with OSCS about some bigger plans for the campus, obviously there are some upfront costs in doing some of that, of some, you know, pictures and renderings and drawings of what a campus might look like. And so I think, you know, one of the other pieces is we're going to have to decide pretty quickly about what amount we as a congregation are willing and able to put in to that effort, you know, knowing that it's, again, to a good place, hopefully when that project continues to move along, but just trying to figure out where that amount fits into, you know, next year's budget. So any property related questions for any of us? Because again, it's been a big, it's exciting, it's a little scary, but and frankly, knowing that there's some of those upfront costs that happen, you know, first before all the plans will get underway is, again, a little daunting. Yes, Amy.
Well, and just for a conversation I was having with other folks around co-housing or whatever, I mean, I just think we should be prepared that we're likely to spend money for possibility planning, right? And then we decide, no, we don't want to do that. I mean, that's just part of the course. You know, something concerned. Exactly. It's part of what you have to do to do the big things.
Good, thank you. You want to come on?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the changes to the community and faith formation part of our budget. You know, you look around on a Sunday morning and you see that we are growing and that we have a lot of children in our midst, which is really exciting. So it only makes sense that because we're growing in that area, our budget needs to stretch in that area. So the increases that we have for next year include, if you look at fellowship activities, which we want to rename to intergenerational activities, we have an increase of $750. And that is for a particular event that we're planning on with Brett and with Robin, who used to cook in here, and Linda Breitag. We're going to have a family dance in the sanctuary in January 20th. Save the date. It's going to be awesome. So that $750 is going to go towards them to be musicians to lead that dance. And then another increase, we have really the 3 lines at the bottom. So intergenerational retreats. Last year, Kelsey Maddox helped to facilitate Advent retreat and Lent retreat. And we had just a wonderful day-long Saturday intergenerational time where we shared in worship. We had various tables with different activities, and it was very life-giving for those who participated. And so we thought we want to do more of this good thing and have more retreats like that in the coming year. So we have budgeted here for 2 retreats in 2024. And then our Whole Lives curriculum was something that we invested in 2 years ago. So last fall, Laura Kerberg, who was trained as an OWL facilitator, met every Sunday night with a group of 7th to 9th graders, including some of our 7th to 9th graders, with partner congregations as well, teaching holistic sexuality education. And let's be honest, the church has not generally done a good job of sharing good values around sexual health. And so we see this investment as the church, taking strides and making an investment in healthy sexuality education for our young ones. So we're budgeting $1,000 to start another course of OWL starting next fall. We didn't have youth to do it this fall, but we'll be ready for that next fall. And then we also have $1,000 towards a children's choir. So we've been in discernment for a little while about having a children's choir. And if we're going to have a children's choir, we have to invest dollars in bringing in somebody to lead that choir. And I'm in conversation right now with a couple of people who are interested in that position. So yeah, those are the major increases. Are there any questions about the MCFF budget? Okay, thanks.
Anissa is gonna come up and talk about reparations.
Really good intro.
Really good intro.
Really good MC. You might remember, October 10th, we had a reparations forum. I wasn't even here. I was watching you on Zoom, but my team was doing a really good job meeting. And you might remember that our amount for that at that forum was $12,000. And you might also be noticing that that's not the line item in the budget. So I want to explain what that was and see what questions you have about that. The first year that we did reparations, our budget was $9,000. And we came to that figure thinking about if we were an organization that paid taxes, which we don't because we're nonprofit, but if we did, about how much would we pay for property taxes? And would we choose to do that in our reparations work? So that's where the $9,000 came from. Then we did our round. We have a whole process that we use to figure out which organizations are doing the life-giving work of repairing harms of the past. And we gave away that $9,000. The next round, we were like, well, okay, that went okay. Let's increase our impact and let's do $12,000. So that's what we talked about in October. And we're sending that $12,000 out into the community right now. Then we met and said, okay, we're on round 3. What do we want to do for round 3? And instead of going up in increments of $3,000, we thought about increasing the percentage. And so that's where the $16,000 came from instead of the $12,000. So we'll approve the $16,000 at our annual budget, and then we'll be in conversation with all of you about how we're going to allocate that $16,000 for the following year. So that's kind of the math. I also will say we have a very dedicated team that has been working on reparations, and we're looking at gaining new members too, and having some people go off and some people go on. One of the budget items in MCFF is for training, and we received some really good training 2 years ago from an organization called Sacred Circles, and it was a group of people that came together to do that work with us, and they're looking at doing another round of this education. And so if somebody is interested in joining reparations, they could do the same training that we did 2 years ago. We have allocated money to pay for that, so you would be able to choose to fund your own trip or use money from our account to do that training and join our team. What comments or questions do you have about our reparations budget? Martha.
I just wanted to add that $9,000 that we started with was like a gross underestimate of what we would pay in property taxes with all the property that we have. And we chose that number because Dan Swenson is on the team, and he was like, well, this is what I pay at Butter, so let's just start with that.
It was very rough.
Well, and I think our understanding of our own wealth and how property is a part of our wealth has been growing, I would say, and has probably had a lot to do with this property work that we were mentioning earlier. That's a part of our wealth, and that's a part of who we are. And so it's part of what we're repairing with the community too.
Where did the money go to for the past 2 years?
Okay, so I can't answer, but I'm wondering if anybody here could answer, because this is our hope, is that is common knowledge that we know. So where has some of our reparations dollars gone? Who knows one organization? Ralph?
Did City of Lakes
Mhm.
Land Trust of which my son benefited by a house.
I loved the story that you told, because his house is in North Minneapolis, correct? Yep. So for 2 years, we've given money to that organization, and the particular project that we're delighted that they're working on is actually one on Franklin. It's, I'm sure you know it, it's right past the intersection up here, and it's the big condo building that has been empty for like 20 years. Like, I remember it being empty for 20 years, and it is no longer empty, and that's one of the projects that our money went to. So that's one.
So it's deeply affordable homeownership to create wealth building opportunities in Black and Indigenous.
Yep, so that's like our wealth building like effort. Rico,
The East Phillips Urban Farm has been in a fight against the city for 10 years.
Mhm.
And they just approved they just approved a huge contract with the city to sell that property. So that money that we sent to them to support them was.
successful. Just on Friday, like just recently. So yep, so for 2 years, we funded that project as well. And that's part of wealth building, but it's also a part of like the community development and detoxifying that area because it's a horrible site. So it had a lot of the efforts, like a lot of the parts of our operations, like rolled into one project. And that's also who we did the auction for, but that was not our reparation money. So like our reparation line item budget that went to them was separate from the auction.
13,770.
Exact. So that's 2 organizations, but there's more. Who else did we fund?
Baby space?
That's not from
Okay,
reparations.
that was outreach.
Yes, but not,
It was trying to undo the harm of the borders.
yes. It's called the Native American Boarding School Living Coalition. Yep, and so you might remember in August, some of us went over to All Nations and we listened to Sandy Whitehawk, who has written a book. She leads that organization, and it's an attempt to think about the Native children who were adopted by white families and healing back. So that effort is about building culture and healing from past harms when culture was taken away.
And it is a direct response to uncovering our own history as a congregation of giving donations to the boarding schools in the 1920s. So.
Yep. On October 10th, when we had the forum, we had dug into some files and we found pictures from the boarding school that we funded in Wisconsin. And so if you're interested in seeing more of those pictures, I still have the slideshow that has a lot of those pictures from the 50s. It was just fascinating to like look at what that history is all about.
The budget actually says 15,000 projected.
We can up it.
Change it. It's
Oh.
a draft.
Okay. The email chain was 16, so that's what I was
It's a
going with.
written document.
Eric,
So on that note, what's it a percent up? And what's the percent and what's the
Oh.
percent up?
Yeah, right.
so you were on that call, Martha. You want to explain that one?
Oh, well, yeah, so we increased it by a third.
Yeah.
From 9,000 to 12,000, and so we wondered as a team, do we want to increase it by another 3,000, or do we want to increase it by a third of 12,000?
So a third of 12,000 is 4,000, and then 12,000 plus 4,000 is 16,000. So, you're just making the math teacher and me happy.
And this is purely semantics. I know all the numbers add up the same, but after 3 years, I wonder if this is ready to move from an extraordinary item into our community budget, our community and faith building budget. It feels extraordinary as part of our mission and work.
That could be very well true. Yep.
Sounds like a little group of strategic initiatives. I mean, it's kind of the name given to it. I wouldn't put too much into necessarily, but
Right.
if it belongs somewhere, it can fit somewhere else or have a separate, but yeah, it's 3 different accounts that are in that. section.
Well, and I will preview a conversation that we're going to have on the 29th of November, and that conversation is about our outreach table. I'm also chair of that, and we've been trying to think for a while about how outreach and reparations work are really linked and connected, and how it might be a better representation of how we think about outreach. And right now, the way things sit, We do have representation from reparations on council because I'm the outreach chair and I'm on reparations. But if it wasn't me, then that wouldn't necessarily be true. And because we've made such a strong commitment to reparations, we want to have that representation on council. And so we're trying to figure out how we could just like make the structure work if I'm not both of those people. Cindy, on the reparations team, by the way.
I think it's important also to note that besides the giving of money and understanding that we did financial harm, we are looking to repair relationships with people. So going to the presentation about the book, going over and for the opening of the
Community Land Trust.
Community Land Trust building, we went over on, was it Palm Sunday to go over to. So there's a real intent to say money is one thing, but relationship is what's really very important.
Yep. And those relationships are driving things. Like on Palm Sunday, we went over, we were in relationship with Rachel Thunderhawk, who is a representative from AIM. And she's been in communication with Martha about things that we might do in the future. And because we went to All Nations and we talked to Pastor Mimi Goodwin, she got us connected with Sandy Whitehawk, who got us connected with the Native American boarding school. So it's like this thing led to this thing, led to this thing, and it's all about relationships and figuring out what the needs of the community are and where their discernment process is so that we can be followers and not leaders.
And I also have Sandy Whitehawk's book and I finished it. And if somebody else is willing to do that, it's in a display right now at Tacoma Square, but if you are interested in it, let me know.
It's really an amazing story. Okay, thank you.
Does anybody have any additional income ideas for next year?
Are they using any additional income?
For next year? Just Rico.
We could do, once a month, pizza for anyone to come and donate and then sell pizzas. You know, I mean, we've had wild success with, getting better and better and getting more teams. Pizza. We have an oven that is sitting there. We have a commercial kitchen.
Yep.
So more meals ministry, more community meals, more community feeding opportunities. And if you want to donate, great. Or we could have a side cottage business where I sit out there and sell pizzas, $5 a slice. So.
But it's not so far. My mom and dad's church has a pizza oven too.
Yep.
And what they decided to do, instead of doing like their mission of the month, like, you know, we have mission of the month, they let community organizations come in and use their oven every month. And then all of the money that they made selling the pizza went to that organization. So it was the organization doing the work, it was organizations, you know, using the capacity of the oven. But then it was community building because the members of the church came and the members of that organization came. But then they made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Not everybody has.
Right.
Well,
Not everybody has a commercial kitchen.
no, and it's great that it's work together because you don't want to just
The,
go.
the encampment are coming here every Sunday now at 3 p.m. The people from the encampment to wash dishes and to fill up water jugs at 2 p.m. every Sunday now. So that's part of the connections and the stuff that you might not see or hear about. It's happening. It's been happening for a few weeks. So, you know, I'm not trying to always blast my horn. Someone says sometimes you need to take a little, you know, but it's, you know, thank you.
It's great. Is that people from the encampment that are coming?
People
to
from
watch?
the encampment.
Okay, great.
Wow. On Sundays, you said.
Sundays at 3 p.m. So if you want to stop by and help open the door and keep the doors open so that I'm not here all alone.
Well, you're going on Monday, right?
Monday morning.
They wanted to serve breakfast. Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody wants to do that, that got started, a little change got started. Bringing bread, peanut butter and jelly, it's not a huge hardship.
So let's take a moment just to recap and go through page by page this packet that I handed out again. Income is the first page. Again, a lot of it's yet to be filled in, but that's why I brought up this income producing idea. If people have any other, yes, Eric.
Sorry,
for
have we, or do we generally hit or exceed that pledge number? So as you all are looking forward, do you anticipate that number will increase or will remain relatively flat? What is your?
I guess my expectation is it's going to go up. I mean, I think especially with a lot of us having talked about Esther coming on board and a new staff in the nursery, and I mean, I think it's sort of an exciting time of expansion in a lot of ways, and hoping that people are going to both be willing and able to live into that with increased pledges. So we'll see next Sunday.
I will say just because I keep track of all those, it really depends as if we get new people to replace other people who either have passed away or have moved or transferred churches. So that's one of the biggest things is to have people we need to keep adding people because we also do see people have to reduce their giving or whatever. So that's kind of the biggest thing. From my perspective.
And then as you move on to page 2, it's starting in the expense area. So again, personnel is going to be adding a lot of information about staff salaries and things, but again, 3 areas of interest there. Again, Esther on board with us for a full year moving forward, so that is super exciting. Again, the nursery faith formation lead. Again, something that the council really wanted to add, and we did, and we'll have that all of next year. And then, as I mentioned a little bit earlier with Martha's sabbatical, there'll be some additional expenses that we'll be building in for guest preachers, etc. So go for it.
Where do we have Esther, like the process costs? Is that-
Those will be on 2. I mean, in the step.
Salaries.
Yeah.
We wanted to speak to
It needs a
that.
separate line item.
Yeah, I need a separate
Yeah.
line item. Do you
Yeah, so
want
there
to
will,
speak on it?
sure.
Okay.
So many of you know that Esther is able to start with us because she has her R1 temporary visa. And we're going to accompany her and Jonathan on the green card process. And that just includes lots of legal fees. So the estimate for this coming year is about $5,000 towards legal fees to support Esther. And I hope that and some of the other things we're naming will excite you to stretch a little bit in your giving. Like we're supporting Esther and Jonathan's path to Jonah's full name is Jonathan. So Jonah, he goes by Jonah. So, yes. So I hope that those kinds of things will inspire you to give a little extra, that we're supporting Esther and Jonah's path to getting a green card, along with the other things we've been talking about.
What percent increase in the expenses do you anticipate in this budget from the current budget?
Yeah, big question.
Ballpark?
3, 4. Yeah. 3 to 4 probably. But I mean, on the looking to page 3, looking at operations expenses, a lot of those are pretty flat. So I mean, I think we've come out of again, some of the increases on utilities and things that had really spiked have really leveled off. So that's obviously a really good thing. Martha's at the bottom of page 3. Martha's already talked about the community and faith formation, including Sub-Zero contra dancing on January 20th. Okay. Wear your moon boots to contra dancing. And then looking at page 4, which is mostly property expenses. And again, we've talked about some of the maintenance pieces, custodial services, and then we will be adding a line item. I don't know exactly where it's going to be yet, but again, some of the planning for the sort of big picture idea for the campus. And getting some expenses then in there so we can be planful as far as looking at options for what we might be doing in future years with campus. And then we've got some sort of placeholder expenses in for insurance and assessments. And again, thank you to the comment about moving extraordinary items from page 5. And sort of mainstreaming some of those things, because I think it's gonna be some expenses that are gonna be with us for a long time to come, so. Comments, reflections? Other things that we are missing?
Awesome work. Thank you. And
I'm, like I said, last Sunday, I mean, I've been here 20 years and I've never been this excited about all the new stuff that's happening, and again, a lot of stuff that we've talked about for a while and sort of been percolating, and it feels like it's so much of it's all coming to fruition at this point, and you know, both on the staffing side with Esther and again with the campus piece that, you know, is going to take some money just to get to the place where a new day is going to be for the campus. So, but I think we're in a good position, and luckily, I think you're going to have the resources to be able to be planful and do that, so we can make some good choices about what we want this corner to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now. So.
There's when we talk about property and expenses and billings, you know, there's been some conversation about painting. You know, just painting alone is a huge expense. And it's you know, I'm not, if you look at the building from the outside, as an outsider perspective, it looks, you know, of course, very white, very kind of like bland, and people sometimes don't even recognize it as a church building, but maybe adding a mural or a couple different installations. So some of those dreams and ideas and thoughts are like, how can we have a mural or a sign or a banner even of, you know, indigenous land, or you know, love one another, love, you know, just stuff like that, but yet in a different color. So, you know, that's a lot of that alone is a huge expense. If you look at the hallways, like the walls, you know, no one really looks at the walls, right? But when I do, it's like, oh, we need a fresh coat everywhere, but it's not my money, you know, so I can't go out and start spending it. So it's just the things that I, as a contractor, painter, whatever, helper, I think about on a regular basis. And the kids marking and paintings and, you know, stuff like that, so.
The other piece I think some of us have been thinking about with property is like, again, if we're on the cusp of big things potentially changing, like what do we need to be doing in the meantime to be good owners, and you know, when we've got renters in a lot of the properties, so what's that right balance of like investing so that they've got safe places to live, and yet, you know, if something's going to be potentially changed pretty dramatically, or maybe even torn down X number of years from now, like you don't want to be putting in too much, because then it's you're sort of living into decisions already being made about what's going to happen if you just put X amount of dollars into whatever. Some people might say, well, if we just did that, then we shouldn't tear the building down or whatever. And at least in my mind, like I'd like to be sure that we're keeping as many options open, because you know, we've got so many properties and such a large plot of land that we're working with, and that gives us a lot of opportunities, so. Yes.
When do you have, agent on my finance, but the numbers for salaries and in particular benefits, because that doesn't really tie to making any raises, to have those numbers, because to me, that's the biggest part of the budget. Is salary. So if the more we can know before next Sunday, the better off, then people will have more of an idea of what does it really mean to have us for a full year and that other, and how much more benefits, because medical, I mean, health insurance goes up. So as much as we could have by next Sunday, I think that would be, I think it would help people.
So we'll look to have a revised version of this coming up later this week. Okay, I'll hang around for a bit if you want to chat further, but thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks, Cal.
Red call, yes.
Well,